And welcome to Pixel Fondue. We've got a live stream today with, count them, 4 members from the Foundry are joining this. From the far left, we've got, this may be the first time longtime Modo users have seen Andy Brown's face, aside from maybe trade shows or training sessions there. So that's the infamous Andy Brown. That's what he looks like. You all know his dulcet English voice. Right after Andy there, we got Derek, Derek Cicero. And then we've got Ed. Everybody knows Ed. So Ed, of course, from Pixel Fondue. And Ed is now working at Foundry. So I love it that community members are being brought into the Foundry fold like they used to be with Ryan Drew and James Darknell and all kinds of people really from the past, Mike Jensen. And of course, Shane Griffith there with the glasses in the hotel room, hanging out in Austin at the Game Developers Conference, trying to look not hungover maybe. I don't know. It was a late night last night.
First day. That comes tomorrow.
First day. All right, that comes tomorrow. All right. So talk about a few things today. First of all, with Ed there and Andy, there's some old people in new roles at Foundry that Derek and Shane want to talk about, and also some new people in new roles like Ed. And we had talked, that was maybe a couple months ago when the licensing change came online. We wanted to make this more of a regular thing. So here we are in September, and we're coming back in October to talk about Modo 11.2, I believe, and that's going to be launched officially. And so we'll cover some other things today, perhaps VR, the GPU rendering. They're running a discount right now, so we'll cover a few things. But right now, let's start off. I'm just going to throw it over to Derek, and we'll talk a little more about the current roles and new roles of the Foundry.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having us. Yeah, kind of two things I want to kick it off with, and then we can kind of get into some of the more kind of product details. But the first is kind of talking about community, and then kind of talking about development. And the community front, we're super excited to have Ed, stealing Ed from Pixel Fondue. But one of the things that the feedback we've gotten from users is the community obviously was different when we were Luxology, when the company was smaller. Part of that obviously was less meetings, smaller company, a little more kind of front facing with some of the developers on the forums. And the developers are still very involved kind of in reading the feedback and getting it, but obviously given kind of where we are as a company right now, harder for them to get on do the same kind of outreach in the past. So we brought Ed on as kind of what we're calling a Modo concierge. And Ed's really kind of focused on two main areas. The first is for all the trialists, people who are either new to Modo or new to, this version of Modo. Ed's there to basically help them out, right? And so literally, we shoot people an email when you start the trial coming directly from us saying, hey, if you have questions, there's a Slack channel. There's the getting started on the forums page. There's all these ways you can get in touch with Ed. And this is a real person who knows Modo at the end of the line, who can either point in the direction of, great training that maybe Andy had done in the past, or, Ed's actually been doing a great job of just literally doing videos for people. How does the mesh paint tool work, whatever, running through a video, throwing it up on Twitter so everyone who has that same question can do it. And it's been fantastic. We've gotten great feedback from people. I think it kind of gets back to, what we've always kind of been as a company is really trying to get a much more direct one-to-one relationship with both users and potential users. And obviously, again, that's for people who are new to Modo or people who just want to try out the latest version who are coming from 8 or 9 or, looking to upgrade. The second part of that is he's locked in with our developers and are actually coming, to our dev calls saying, hey, this is the feedback we're getting from, from users today, right now on these product, on the features. And so, Ed's been great, and I'll let him kind of introduce himself real quick, but I'll jump to Andy and let them kind of both go. And on the Andy side, really excited to have Andy, like I said, if you've used Modo in the past and Modo, downtown Andy Brown, the sounds. That's how I go to sleep at night, actually, listen to Andy in my ear. And so Andy's come on as the design lead for Modo. And so what that really means is, you have features and you have workflows. And one of the things you run into, as you, Greg, probably know as well as anybody, is sometimes the feature works, but it doesn't always work as part of a workflow, right? And so as an individual thing that's been implemented, it does the task. But when you try and are trying to build something, it doesn't always work together. And obviously Andy, both from his using standpoint, but also probably has trained more people on Modo than anybody else, was the ideal person to bring in and really help drive the requirements of the product moving forward. So what that means is, we sit down, look at the feature list, what we need to build, but Andy really owns what we call the user story of how that comes into how you use the product. I would use it to accomplish this task.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing now, that having Andy Brown in that role. And if you think about what Derek was saying, if you look at mesh operation features, right? These are features, Boolean features of mesh operations. They're all there. When William Vaughan introduced Mott Booleans, a really popular kit just a while ago, they use the same features. It's the same feature, it's just a different workflow, right? And it seems to be a little more popular workflow that artists kind of wrap their heads around. And now we've got Andy Brown, a professional artist who's also a Modo expert, involved in taking some of these features and formulating workflows. So there's two sides of the same coin, but it's super important because great features without great workflows doesn't help you a lot as an artist. So it's great.
They're useless.
They're useless. Useless, as Andy would say.
Well, it's true, right? I mean, the best feature in the world, if it's not accessible, is really not helping you, right? And so that's where, starting with 11.2 and moving into the 12 series, Andy essentially will be the one working hand in hand with developers to really say, this is good, but let's make it great, right? So let's really kind of make sure that this is working correctly. And one of the things that it's funny because obviously, you're on the forums, Greg, and there's a lot of different feedback from people that you'll get in the forum sometimes where it's like, I want all these features, I want you to do all this stuff, but I want you to fix all these other things and get this workflow right. And I would say, that's kind of where the idea of things like the Modo VR and doing some of the betas and the lab stuff allows us to kind of push the envelope on some of the new feature stuff, where Andy can really focus on the people who are using Modo every day for their jobs, how to make that experience better, how to really uncover a lot of features we've actually built in maybe 801 or 901. We do them a little bit now, can really be much more powerful tools than maybe they were originally as they were designed, right? And so basically, that's Andy's job, is really on, he'll be talking to customers, he'll be talking to people, he'll be involved in the dev, but he'll really be the one who is focused on driving the product. And then Ed's really going to be the one who is, driving a lot of the community involvement and getting, that feedback. And they'll be working together as well to make sure that, what Ed's seeing and what Ed's hearing is getting funneled directly into Andy.
I think that's great. And Ed, again, having people who use Modo every day, Modo experts who know what it's like to just sort of trudge through a program 8 to 10 hours a day, interacting with users is super helpful. And I know I'm going to have feedback for Andy, and it may be going through Ed with regards to workflows and things like that. But he's a tireless young man.
He worked for Hurricane.
He worked through a hurricane. That's right. We had to delay this a week because Ed was on a hurricane.
Yeah, I should have apologized for that right away. Sorry, guys. But right. anytime I get an email and anybody has a workflow idea, I'm taking everything seriously. You can always contact me personally at ed.ferrari@foundry.com, and I'll make sure everything gets to Andy, it gets to the appropriate party, and it gets taken seriously and looked at because it's an important part of.
Yeah, so absolutely. For instance, a real-world example of that is right now, Foundry is doing this really great thing, I think, where they're releasing open betas to Modo users. And the Edge Bevel tool in any program is one of those features that's used on every single hard surface model ever made, probably 100 times. Every single model is going to use that feature. So it has to be done really well. And Foundry, I know Taz, one of the developers, is putting a huge amount of time into that. But a developer is going to be like this, right? And they're not interacting. They just don't have time to interact with 300 users every day. I've looked at all this feedback, and this is how Cinema 4D solves this problem. And here's how Maya does it. And here's maybe a good idea over here. But you bring Ed's attention to it. He's going to keep track of the thread. He's going to solicit images and workflows from other programs. He'll collate that data, get it over to Andy, get it over to Taz or the developers. And that feature is going to be improved. It's not going to come out sight unseen. Everyone's going to be like, okay, that's great, but why can't it solve this? We're getting that stuff out of the way during the process. So I think that's really great. Andy, why don't you, I assume, are you excited about maybe this new job? I know you've been, besides doing training, you do a lot of on-site stuff. Like Andy may, show up over at Mercedes where they use Modo for like a month. And
do I not look excited?
That's Andy excited. He's a little bit like, Well, tell us a
I'm
little
really
bit.
excited. That's,
Good, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
So what is involved?
I've been on one side of the coin for many years. You know, obviously I was a user first, and then I, started working for Luxology and being on the kind of the sales, marketing, and training side of it. So I've always been on that side of the coin. And much like many other users, I was probably one of the persons kind of grumbling at features, and oh, I wish that was in there. You know, and I could talk to people internally about that, but now I'm kind of flipped on the other side of the coin, and I've actually got in a position to actually make something happen now, which is very exciting.
Do you feel some pressure on you, some weight? Like, okay, I'm this, premier expert Modo user.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there is a lot of responsibility to get it right, and I don't want to.
Yeah, no, fear
I don't
is
want
a
to
good
make the product worse.
We know who to blame if it does.
But
All right.
I think an important thing I think is about me. So I'm obviously I bring what I think to the table, but my job really is more of a kind of a filter and a funnel from information that's coming from lots of different areas, and I've kind of got to try and collate that, present that to developers, and then just work with the developers to make sure that they understand the problem, and then the feature is going in the right direction. What's nice is I've got the kind of power to say, no, that feature, you've done that wrong, do it again, which is that's going to be the interesting bit, I think.
Right.
Just making sure we get these features right when they're implemented.
So if you have some users who are banging away on a beta and they see a new feature, maybe it's a new mesh operation or something like that, and they have some ideas about how maybe it could be better, or at least want to communicate with you, is it best to go through Ed? Do they post on the forum? Are you watching forums? Do they contact you directly?
They can go on the forums. They can talk to Ed. They can talk to me directly. Andy.brown@foundry.com.
Andy.brown@foundry.com, and you keep an eye on the various forums and Slack groups. Slack is becoming is an official Modo Slack group now, in case people have missed it. Ed, I know, is really active on there, and so again, it's a good place to go for information and to have a conversation rather than maybe just posting information.
Yeah,
I'm just getting my head around Slack at the moment.
We're really trying to just be out there in more ways. I mean, there's so many different ways to connect with people via social media, Facebook, Slack, Twitter, our forums, other people's forums, and all this stuff. And having Ed and Andy as two additional conduits to that is going to be a big significant change for us. So it's not like we were ignoring information from the past, but now we just have a better way to channel that directly into the developers in a more meaningful way, because they're going to have that kind of background and user perspective layer, to put over top of it.
And the immediacy of Slack is just such that's really its greatest strength, because there's actually a really great. It's almost like just a branch of the existing community. There's so many people that are there that are active, and they'll help you. Like I said, with an immediacy, it's they're just there to answer questions at midnight, or because it's global. So
it's global. That's right. Yeah, I usually see Alex Gusera and some of the Frank and some of the other Pixel Fondue guys coming on Slack around 3 a.m. when I'm still at work, saying
good morning.
Yeah. I'm still here. So let's talk about the community real quick. We get back a little bit more about Ed and Andy, but Ed, this is particularly part of your job, I think. Just the way the world is now, you've got Foundry forums, you've got Slack, the Modo Facebook page, the unofficial Modo Facebook page, I think, is really with some 6,000 members. It's just probably the largest community as far as I can tell. You got people over at Pixel Fondue. You've got Twitter. You said you do a lot of videos you may throw up on Twitter. Is there a place, maybe a sticky somewhere, where new users can go and say, here's how to follow us? Maybe the top of the general discussion forums, like go to, here's our Twitter, here's our Facebook, here's our Slack. Get on these. We're looking at all of them.
That's something we should definitely do. I mean, the forums are still the best place where everything is just going to be saved for forever. Anything that's worth saving for posterity's sake, you can always find old information on the forums. As many people know, Slack does only save about 10,000 messages, so that's why it's really good just for like quick conversations, trying to solve a problem really quickly. But I would say the forums are probably still your best bet to find just solid information about Modo. And we should definitely kind of have like a resource for all of the different channels and I think the best place would probably be on the forums. Yeah,
on the forums.
Sure. What we've done recently, we created a getting started forum. So for really anybody that's new or or coming back to Modo again, that's your primary go-to spot. Because even the forums, I mean, there's so many different places to look for information, and we're trying to channel things directly to that one, newbie spot, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Even the forums got so sort of fragmented. Like I only really visit 3 of them on a regular basis. So, and so that's good to hear. Besides
that being said, Greg, the getting started section is I think it's really benefiting a lot of brand new users. I mean, the questions that I'm hearing on that specific section of the forums are basically the questions that I had when I started, and it's nice just to have that all focused in that one area. I think it.
Yeah, I noticed there's a getting started on Slack as well. There's a sort of a new that seems to be like maybe the most active channel on Slack.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And so one of the things, go ahead, Derek.
So yeah, when you trial, you get an email from Ed sort of saying that, hey, you can go on Slack here, you can email me directly, you can go on the forum, and so we can kind of summarize that, maybe put the sticky on top of the getting started forum. But the one thing I was going to say is, I think kind of to your point earlier, when we started, there were just the forums, right? And there wasn't, I mean, we're all old enough to it was MySpace, maybe it wasn't
a bulletin board system.
Exactly, the old BBS. And so, yeah, I mean, part of it as we have more ways to communicate, obviously it is harder to keep up with all of them at the same pace, right? And so that's why I do think we're trying to kind of focus it a little bit to Ed's point, the kind of quick question and answer is more on Slack. The stuff that's more, you want to search for. I'm sure someone else had this problem in the past. How do I go find that person? You can go search on the forums. I think for Facebook, we're putting a lot, trying to really show off a lot of artwork and things that people are doing. And kind of make that a little more, marketing's the wrong word, but a little more kind of, get you excited about Modo, what people are doing with Modo, and kind of some of the artists that are doing great stuff with Modo. So it's kind of each one has their own sort of focus, if you will.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But that was it.
So I've seen a. Sorry, I've got people coming into my office over here. Get out of my office. We've got Shane or Ed maybe talk this a little bit. Trials are something like everybody downloads a ton of trials, right? I'm coming out of my ears with trials from Houdini and Isotropics or Nuke, whatever. And the thing with most trials is there's a certain event horizon with learning 3D software. It's complicated. It takes a while. You typically just kind of give up or run out of time before you get into it. And so with Modo in particular, to really appreciate some of the finer aspects of the program and where it has a bit of an edge over some of the competition, you need to use it for a while and wrap your head around it fairly quickly. Otherwise, that interest in the trial is going to dry up and they're just not going to click on it. So how do you connect with these people and keep that interest going and make sure that the questions are being answered and not come off as bothering them or being a pushy salesperson? Ed,
there's a few things that we can do. One, what we're doing now is we're just trying to get out there as early as possible, just contacting the trialists on day one when they download it and just letting them know everything that's available. And things like Pixel Fondue and especially William Vaughn's Vaughn in 60 Seconds, which isn't much of a time commitment and just shows them what's possible, what features are possible in Modo. That's an enormous help. We also make it clear that it's a 30-day free trial, but now that Modo is on the point, like the kind of point release cadence, you can download a new trial every time a new release, every time a new version comes out. So was that 90 days? So
a year. Yeah.
So that's huge.
Yeah.
So it's not.
I think the big thing is Ed isn't on a commission, and that was a really key point to why, we hired Ed for a particular thing, and it's really to handhold those customers on a trial from a non-sales perspective. There's no sales pressure. He's literally there to be your best friend and help you get going in, 10 days or less, as quick as possible. Because you need, the best way to learn an application is often when your office, partner sitting next to you knows it, right? And you can go tap them on the shoulder and you can ask them something quick. Well, the struggle with, a lot of new applications or Modo is, your partner next to you doesn't know that application, and you're the first one in the company to learn it. So how do we get on those seats? And Ed is really that guy. He's the one he's there. He's directly emailing you. He's directly answering you at all hours of the day. It's, you know, he's just so energized and personable, and that's what I love about it. And it's really changing the trial process in a big way for us.
That sounds great.
You know, I want to add one point to that because it's really important, which is, yeah, Ed, you know, reports up through us, so he's not on the sales side. I don't mean that as a negative, you know, on the sales side, but, you know, he's not measured on selling Modo. He's actually measured on how many questions he's answering, right, and how much he's in the community. And so it really is, you know, I remember Brad told me when I first joined, you know, his belief is always the app with the best users wins. And, you know, I think that makes a lot of sense, right, which is ultimately if you educate your users and you help your users be powerful and your users make great images and your users do great work, that will drive more people to your product, right? That's how you sell it, right? You sell the product by having great users. So, you know, the whole goal of that is, I mean, and I think you're asking what the biggest barrier is. The biggest problem is I think people get an email from Shane or from Ed and they think it's, oh, this is just, you know, a boilerplate email. No, this is actually an email that's coming from them. You can email them back and they will help you. An actual person will go on there and answer your question. And, you know, once people realize that, they're like, oh, this is actually really great and helpful. But they're so used to, oh, I'm going to like go in and get an automated chat bot talking back to me. Honestly, that's the biggest problem. That's why I wanted to actually have Ed come on here and show he is not a chat bot. He's a real live human being.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for like communities with active, friendly, helpful users who don't just complain or jump from application to application is a huge boon to a community. In fact, Andy, you know, Andy's just been with Modo forever, but I remember when Andy was just a user back on Modo 101 or so. I think he was probably the first user brought in full time. Don't you think, Andy, as an employee?
Yeah.
A number one, the first guy. So, Andy, do you have some specific short-term and long-term goals in terms of workflows in Modos, things you'd like to do? Maybe by the 12 cycle, and then something that may not be going till the 14.
Ooh. Well, I can't commit to anything at the moment because we're still kind of in the process of working all of that out.
Right.
And I'm also just trying to get my anyway. But I think
get your bearings.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I layer into the mix of all this, and there still is a strategy over top of everything that we're trying to apply to things. And there's a healthy mix of what you need to do to keep the existing users happy and accelerating with the product, and then also growing the business and where we need to be strategic and things that we need to focus on, and you know, new horizons and new blue oceans that are out there. So that's the type of stuff that I would feed into Andy, give him a kind of a rough framework of where we want to go with a product into the next year. And then Andy's goal is to dig into those. You know, if we're gonna make you know, modeling and procedural modeling a key focus for the 12 series, Andy's gonna go in there and he's gonna tell me we need to do this, this, and this in those areas to be successful. So it's a good team effort between all of us that you see here. You know, the 4 boxes down there, and how we decide what's going to happen into the 12 series, the 13 series, and so on.
A big thing for me personally, that's kind of been on my mind for a long time. It's just the fact that there's a lot in Modo that maybe isn't quite as visible. A lot of really powerful stuff in there that maybe isn't used as much as it should be, or maybe hasn't been developed as far as it should have been. One thing I would like to do, I can't give you any kind of time frame, is to kind of maybe tease those things out a little bit more and polish those things.
Well, I would think, I would think with some of your experience going into companies, oftentimes they use other programs and demonstrating Modo or training people on Modo for a couple weeks at times, has given you some insight into what aspects of the program people aren't familiar with and what aspects of the program people are really impressed by. Let's say if you're a 3D Studio Max user or a Maya user, and then you see, you know, people, there's certain aspects of Modo, I'm sure, that you see over and over again. People are like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I haven't seen that in a program before.
But one of the most interesting experiences you have, or I've had, when teaching people, is when I'm teaching people who've never done 3D before. I'm sitting in a room. I've got a week to teach maybe 15 people who've only ever used Illustrator how to do 3D. And that when people are completely green coming to the whole process, Modo, and you kind of see the sweat on the brow and the.
I think we're losing Andy.
The pain.
Oh my God, he's a robot! I knew it. They've taken over.
The bandwidth across the pond is not working so well today.
I think that's gone. Well done.
Oh, we got you. Well, let me ask you this, Ed. Like, how many people who do trials of Modo are brand new to 3D versus I'm a Maya user? I've heard about this program. I'm going to check it out.
It's actually a pretty healthy split. It's probably about, I would say maybe a third are brand new to 3D. Shane,
a third, okay, wow.
Yeah, we get a really, I mean, that's a unique thing about Modo is we get a really healthy mix. We get quite a bit of, completely new to 3D people, especially, obviously on the design side. We've been doing better and better within apparel and soft product goods and things like that, where 3D is really a very new thing to that industry. So we tend to attract a lot of traditional 2D illustrators and design artists into the product.
Right. Okay. So that's really interesting. So you got a healthy mix there. Andy, you've trained both experienced people and new users. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this sort of, more fleshed out strategy of interacting with users and having Modo experts who use it every day involved in the development process. Anybody else new on the development team over there? I know you guys I've seen new names popping up occasionally. What do we have going on behind the scenes in terms of just some new people over at Foundry? Anybody want to talk about? Give a shout out. Don't have to be specific. Who's handling Alembic?
That's a pretty good question. We have Milan and Milos. Milos is a new hire, which is actually Milan's brother.
Yeah.
Our Serbian friends over there in Eastern Europe. So Milos has been really cranking away. Completely new developer to Modo, been able to pick it up really, really quickly and pushing a lot of the file I/O features. He'll be soon taking over on the Modo Bridge work, and we hope to continue to expand on that. That in particular is a piece of tech that was developed out of the central research team under John Wedelton. So we're getting a lot of nuggets of gold, if you will, are coming from other areas of the company. So Modo VR, Modo Bridge. These are all bits and pieces of tech that were developed outside of the Modo team that roll back into the product, and we continue to push them further.
So this is something I think people have been looking forward to for quite a while since Modo was acquired by the Foundry, is to see some technology coming in from these larger development teams over there with Nuke or what have you, and benefiting from that. So the bridge technology you're talking about, Unreal right now, which is the Unreal Bridge, where you can push and pull assets to and from Unreal, but you're talking about maybe expanding that to other programs as well.
Yeah, it was actually originally developed as part of a research project to connect just Foundry applications, just in a generic sense, all of our applications together in a more direct fileless exchange. So it's a direct comlink connection in a client-server scenario. So you set up a server on one system and a client on another. You could have both sitting on the same system, where you typically see file exchange occurring on the same desktop, from one app to an app. We've expanded upon that and created more of a network protocol that connects applications together and allows artists to push and pull information at will between these applications. And it's no longer like what we did with the Unreal and Unity plugins on the 10 series. They were basically an FBX file with an XML sidecard onto it to carry all the material information, the shader information. Everything that we're doing with the bridge now is just a direct application-to-application communication that's occurring. So we really, set that up as first as the Unreal connection. We look to expand that to, obviously Unity would be high on the list. but other applications within the Foundry, Katana, Mari, a new connection, all those things are a lot more possible as we continue to expand on what that protocol is capable of handling.
So you're at a game developers conference right now in Austin, and I know you were at SIGGRAPH, right, Shane? I'm sure you were. And so what sort of interest is there from artists filtering by the booth in a bridge to Unreal or Modo VR, for that matter, some of these new technologies that we're starting to see in Modo?
Well, VR it finally feels like it's here. I think we've all been very pessimistic about this, over the last year and a half. And skeptical in a large way, how applicable is this going to be to the industry? And every time I go to one of these events, I've been at about, a half a dozen of them or so this year. Every step of the way, you're seeing more and more genuine interest. And I think it's really coming down to the headsets are just out there in a bigger way. Everybody at this point in time has started to experience it. And once you do that, the light bulbs go off in your head. And especially when they come to Modo and Modo VR. So it's such a different approach to this problem, or really this new horizon, if you will, that it's really lighting up people's eyes. It's pretty exciting to see, and we've had a constant crowd at the show today. Oh,
good. Well, both Oculus and Vive prices have come down by a couple $100. I mean, it seems like a good time to buy. You think like Modo VR, the ability to jump into VR and see your assets with a headset on while you're authoring them, it seems like that's a must-have feature if you're authoring for VR. It just seems like you're sort of muddling around in the dark if you can't just pop on the headset and look at your asset, make sure everything's cool. And if you're just looking at a screen, that's, it's like delivering, back in the day we used to do, well, even now when you're doing broadcast work, you need to watch it on a broadcast monitor.
Exactly.
Don't pump stuff out.
The age-old problem is how quick can you see final pixels? So the more that us as vendors can shorten that loop, the better the artwork gets, and the more those problems get worked out in the flow, in the moment. So Modo VR, certainly from a visualization, standpoint, gives that artist quick access to seeing what that item is going to look like. And let me tell you, it is mind-blowing how much better sense of scale and perspective you get the minute you put that headset on. I mean, it truly is, and it's something you have to experience. But then, our next phase of this is going into creation mode. Because we've taken, really a VR view and put that into a DCC, we have all of the palette of what a DCC can provide already there in a VR environment. Where everybody else out there in the market has created, a VR sculpting tool or VR modeling tool or a VR viewer, and they're trying to add these features to that platform. We've kind of done the reverse approach to that, and now the possibilities are really endless. All of my conversations this morning so far at the show have been, if you have an idea of something you want of a VR app you want to do, you could prototype that completely inside of Modo. You could build out that entire experience and
yeah, that's what I've seen. Some of the demos by Greg Brown, they're just using standard Modo rigging tools in the advanced viewport. And while you can jump over to Unreal or something like that live now with Modo, you can also just rig up an interactive scene and put on the headset and test things out without ever leaving the app and having access. Like you said, all those tools are already there. It's not like you're a VR viewing program that's trying to add a rotation tool or something like that. So that's interesting. It's going to be interesting. I was talking to Ed earlier before we started. I'm like, okay, I was going to wait till Vive 2.0, but at this point, it's only a few $100 to get started on this. And I have clients, corporate clients, asking for VR projects now because it's finally filtering down and out. And if you want to stand out, if you're at a trade show, a technology trade show or something like that, then you do VR. So that's interesting. Andy, have you been messing around with VR at all?
I have. It's just interesting what you say. Like, probably every client I've visited over the last year or so, I've always asked, "What about VR? What about VR?" And these big companies, they all want it.
Not just gaming clients, but like
design clients, anybody. It's happening.
It's happening.
In some respects, we've actually seen more traction on the design side and on the ArcViz side that we've had seen on some of the games pieces, just from a standpoint of because their problem is essentially, to Shane's point, visualization. How do I see this in context? I want to see a shoe on a shelf. I want to see, this thing I've built in the real world, the sense of scale. And I'm with Shane that, when we first started this, where we weren't quite sure what's going to happen, how applicable it will be. And the problem is most people who object to it haven't tried it in an actual workflow. Like when you actually say, okay, now I want to see this shoe on a virtual shelf, and you put the headset on, you kind of have that, oh, now I get it moment, right? And so to Annie's point, I mean, some of the people that we kind of thought would be the late adopters are the ones who are pushing actually closer up, because it comes down to just it's visualization and context, right? I mean, it's ultimately, as Shane was saying, it gets you to correct faster, right? And that's ultimately, what people are trying to solve for. I do kind of want to answer you had one question, sort of the teams and kind of who's new and different. And one of the things is, I think we talked about this the last time. I want to kind of reiterate is, people say, well, the Modo team is sort of smaller now. It's actually just different now. It's actually, if you add it all up, it's actually a much bigger team. It used to be just a Modo team, and now there is the Nexus team who's working on the core architecture, the Modo team that's developing on top of that. There's the entire R&D group that John Wedelton is running, where things like Modo VR are coming out of, so that the Modo and Nexus teams can be focused on their tasks. And some of these kind of R&D tasks, we're not 100% sure how it's going to fit into the product, or is it a new product? Is it going to bridge multiple products? They're coming and bringing that to bear. And we also still are doing some smaller projects with customers. Mark Brown, for example, is coming back, who did all the animation stuff for Modo. Is coming back full time on the Modo team. He's been working on some focused client work, which again helps because it informs the product, but also actually code from that comes back into Modo. So there's a lot of different ways that code comes into Modo now that it didn't in the past. But Mark, obviously, given his animation background, is coming back on board. We won't talk about all the things he's going to work on, but with his background, you can make some assumptions of what Mark might be working on in the future.
Yeah, so that's good to know. People always do. There's a lot of I animate a lot in Modo. I do a ton of animation in Modo. Mark is a great developer. He does some really innovative stuff. It's great to hear that he's got some experience in some other groups. He's coming back to do some Modo-focused work. Matt Cox, of course, has done a lot of work on Mesh Ops. I just like to mention some names because these guys work really hard behind the scenes, and probably most of the feedback they get is, why doesn't this work differently? Or why isn't it, it's not that often where somebody's like, oh man, I love the bevel tool. They just don't. So just trying to shout out some people, give you a chance to recognize some of the people working hard there. Before I jump off, I want to talk about some of the other side projects like GPU rendering that you had showcased a bit at SIGGRAPH. I just want to talk a little more about VR really quickly. I just looking at the chat over here, Lauren from Pixel Fondue mentioned she'd already done 2 VR projects this year. There's maybe doing a third one. It's great to see people in the community making money off of this. One of the things that's going to go hand in hand with VR, of course, is the advanced viewport. And the advanced viewport in Modo, I think it was initially released in maybe 801. Is that right?
901.
So it's been a steady. There's been improvements every version, every iteration of Modo to the advanced viewport. My favorite new feature in Modo, I have to say, is anti-aliased wireframes. I love the anti-aliased wireframes. It just looks nice. If you use a lot of CAD data like I do, and you're constantly bringing up these massive CAD models, it just looks nice. It just looks nice to work in. But I just want to confirm that you're continuing to work on the advanced viewport. It is obviously must be an important component to VR workflow or Unreal or things like that. Shane, you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's huge. That's where a lot of the work on Modo VR has transcended back into Modo as end user feature benefits. So Duncan Hopkins, which originated that architecture, and it was actually originally developed inside Amari. They spun it out of Amari and redid it, and that's when it got brought over into Modo in the 901 phase. So that's where Duncan's roots are, and lately Duncan's been working on the Modo VR project. So all of those enhancements to the advanced viewport, were done by Duncan for Modo VR. So that's how all this kind of ecosystem is working together for us. We also have now Milan is picking up on the AVP code on the Modo core team side, so he's going to continue to push Modo specific features into that code. So it's not just Duncan. It's things are happening all around these systems throughout the company. So definitely continuing to push that further and further, and it's a key part of what will hopefully, as we move further into VR, what will separate Modo from the rest of the pack.
Emmanuel Forrest is asking in the chat, how's performance in VR? First of all, Emmanuel lives in Mexico City, so he's doing all right. Big earthquake there. I know he spent yesterday, joining teams and helping to dig people out of rubble. So nice to see that he's safe and sound. He's already asking Modo questions.
Yeah, Emmanuel's awesome.
He's been fantastic for Pixel Fondue. He's doing all the work on the website there. But VR runs at a higher refresh rate, right? We're looking at 60 frames per 60 hertz. Is that correct? Or 60 frames per second typically when you're
higher than that. I mean, we've some of the demos that I'm showing here are running at 90 plus frames per second. So it's
so the advanced viewport needs to keep up. One of the things I've noticed with the advanced viewport is you expect it to be the slowest viewport because it's the advanced viewport. It must have the most features, but it's actually one of the fastest viewports. Maybe the fastest viewport outside of something like wireframe. But are you trying to actively keep up with a certain asset complexity level and a frame rate? Is there benchmarks you're trying to hit?
And those are always changing, are always growing, right? So especially with I think there was an 8K VR headset just announced recently. So the requirements, the requirements there are never ending, and it's a big challenge to keep up with. But that's exciting. I mean, it's causing all types of new hardware to come out on the GPU side of things, and it's just fueling tons of money into the industry as a whole, which is really causing innovation and advancement.
Yeah, things are happening rather quickly. I know. I was kind of hoping, we cool it with the 8K. I do not want a client coming to me saying, "Oh, can you get this in 8K?" Geez, come on, man. 4K is bad enough. It's still rendering, it still takes 20 minutes to. Talking about rendering, maybe that's a good segue into GPU rendering. You showcased a beta or a prototype of AMD's Radeon Pro renderer operating inside of Modo at SIGGRAPH, and this is, people have been asking about GPU rendering on Modo for quite some time. Native GPU rendering, even though you can get Octane and both V-Ray have GPU rendering. I use both of them here at Sabertooth, and they're both fantastic solutions. But people want GPU rendering out of the box. They want to grab something and use a standard Modo material and see the results on their GPU. So Radeon Pro Render, correct? That's what it's officially called, Radeon Pro Render?
Correct, yep.
And that is utilizing OpenCL. So even though it's Radeon, if you have NVIDIA GPUs, it will work on NVIDIA as well, correct?
Yep.
And have you guys entered into some sort of collaborative agreement with AMD to showcase this in one of the premier DCCs, being Modo, or you just sort of picked it out of a bin and decided this is the one you want to pursue? How did that get started?
We looked at a lot of different things that are out there, and I think what AMD really brought to the table was the openness of the plugin or of the render that they have to offer. It's not hardware specific. It will actually run even in CPU mode, albeit it's not as fast or as great in CPU mode as it is in the GPU mode. But it's not specific to AMD hardware, which is nice. And it's open source. It's intended to be an open source API. So hopefully, with us supporting it, with Maxon supporting it, and others out there, coming online to support it, it'll continue to advance, very, very quickly. And it's already, it's a pretty solid renderer. We've had a lot of key users really get excited by the, possibilities of it. Even Simon and Martin on our own internal teams are probably our top rendering guru as a user perspective, and they're super excited about the opportunity here. So it's really pretty cool. It gives us a great way to improve the APIs that other renderers use to plug into Modo, and that's probably the most important aspect of this. When Chaos guys plugged into Modo, they had to develop their own render window to do that, and same with the Octane guys. So it's allowing us to build a better infrastructure for those tools to plug into Modo more directly, and gain access to the underlying core technology of Modo more directly. So Those are the things that's going to take this project a little longer to develop, because we are redoing a lot of those APIs, but things are progressing really well. We've been reviewing the roadmap for that just earlier today as well. And our intent is to get that out there into users' hands probably around the November, December timeframe this year, as an open beta for anybody that's currently on subscription or maintenance, just like Modo VR was released out there. So
within a couple months.
Yeah, it's coming.
And so it will be an actual separate download. It's not going to add as a kit to your current Modo. It's going to be a separate download.
It'll be delivered probably as a plugin.
As a plugin, okay.
Yeah, I mean it's really compartmentalized in a way that we can deliver it as a plugin. Long term, that's yet to be determined. We haven't really fully decided if this is something that will ship with Modo, or ship as, continue to be as maybe a benefit to subscription customers or maintenance customers. But yeah, we're exploring different ways to deliver this long term. For now, it's we want to get it in there and make sure it has a really rich feature set associated to it, and expand on that as best as we can before we actually decide what to do with it as a a commercial product, if you will.
So that's going to slip in there. People are going to be able to download it, start the feedback loop with Foundry in a couple months. Sounds like with talking about the APIs that you're looking at maybe expanding Modo in such a way where you can just pick your renderer, and whether you're using the shader tree or just the standard Modo render layout and the tools in the preview window or whatever, that the renderer, you'll be able to use more of the standard Modo rendering tools with whatever renderer you happen to choose that is best for your purposes.
All right. I mean, that's right. I mean, that's a big shift over Modo in the last 3 years. I mean, we've really opened up Modo to a lot more users because of that, because of, V-Ray's in there, because Octane is in there. And that's really important to us because, you already have picked a renderer. You've probably already invested a lot of time, and especially in a pipeline scenario where there's, literally hundreds of users and lots of investment around a rendering pipeline. They're not going to want to switch the rendering pipeline and the creation pipeline, right? So if we can make Modo more accessible to other existing rendering pipelines, then that makes it easier for Modo as just the main tool to come in and be the creation component of that, or creation spoke of that, if you will. So we're getting Modo out there and used more because we're more open now on the rendering side of things.
Yeah, I've always felt Modo was a great platform for rendering. Oh, getting some feedback. So let's you got it. So let's just, I'm going to take one more question from the chat window over here. I know you guys have seen this quite a few times, but Modo ships with a fantastic set of procedural textures. And of course, everybody wants to use those who typically uses them in their day-to-day workflow. Their Modo renderers would like to use them with Octane or V-Ray or the GPU, the Radeon Pro render, Redshift after it comes to Modo, something like that. So in order to enable that, you would need some sort of rasterizer, some sort of automatic baking mechanism to make those textures work. Is that something in the back of your heads over there at Foundry?
Definitely. I mean, that's, at least initially, we'll probably go with a baking solution to that problem. And that's part of what we're expanding on these APIs. So once we develop kind of that automatic baking approach to those procedurals, and then it'll hopefully expose a way for Chaos Group to access that, or Octane guys to access that, and allow those other renderers to take it, take that and run with it. Longer term, we do have thoughts on how we can more directly connect the math of those, instead of baking it out, directly connect the math of those shaders to those other render engines. But that's going to take a lot more work, and is a much bigger project to get to. So at least initially, in the short-term time frame, we're going to look at more automatic baking approaches to those problems.
Yeah, and I think that's a legitimate solution. Even V-Ray doesn't support all of their procedural textures in the GPU side of the renderer. It's a problem everybody has to deal with. So it's great to hear that there's some momentum building on that aspect of it. The procedural textures in Modo are fantastic. There's just a ton of them. So anything else on rendering you want to note? Andy, anything? Ed?
There was one thing about, I wanted just to get back about VR, just to let you know, the reception to VR, the interest through the trialists, that's been pretty significant. So just something to keep in mind if, for anybody who's a little bit skeptical. I just wanted to make sure I get that out there because as you mentioned, it's coming and VR is huge, and you don't want somebody else who's interested to come in and eat your lunch because you're kind of holding out on on VR. It's
absolutely. I think VR is one of those things. I really need to get a headset and start messing around with it. Maybe we'll do a little contest on Pixel Fondue or something to see if we can get some momentum behind some VR asset creation. It must just be a lot different, I imagine, when you put that headset on and see your creations. And sort of.
I was lucky enough to try a HoloLens a few weeks back in the office, and that blew my mind because they were walking around the office and there were models popping up on desks. I was pressing menus and things turning around.
I've tried the HoloLens. It's pretty cool. Well, even with even if you're using just a phone as a viewer, whatever you're using as a viewer, whether it's head or whatever, when you see something tracking live in 3D, I remember tracking stuff, taking days to track stuff into shots, by hand. It's just now it's just live, 30, 60 frames per second, 90 frames per second on a phone. It's pretty amazing. And like Shane was saying earlier, this technology has some heavyweights behind it, right? So you got Facebook, you've got some, Google, you got some major heavyweights behind this technology. You're going to see some innovations. And as a content provider, it's important to be at the forefront of that. Let's see. We had a couple other questions here.
The one thing after the rendering is, obviously, I think as kind of Shane mentioned, our goal is to really kind of bring in, people have their own render, they bring it in, they work with what they want to work with. But we're still also investing. Alan's still working very hard, and his team. We're still very much investing in our renderer as well. So we're still committed to giving you a great renderer out of the box in addition to that. So I want to make clear that we're not sort of positioning it as we're doing this and walking away from our own solution, but rather we basically want to say, look, we got a great solution that comes with the product. If you happen to have your own or want something different, we'll make that work as well. It's really just about kind of the customer choice and rendering, right? But I know that just kind of seeing some stuff that Alan's been working on lately, we're going to have some interesting things on our end coming as well.
Yeah, Alan Hastings is obviously one of the premier render developers in the world, and has been for literally decades now. And there's been little updates to Modo's render in every single version, every single iteration has some rendering updates. And Modo's still considered to have perhaps the best built-in renderer of any application. One of the things I like to note on rendering, just from recent experience, just this current project I'm working on, is there's a built-in plugin to Modo for Rebus Render Farm. I'm giving a bit of a free plug right here just because I use it. But cloud rendering, it's almost shocking how affordable it's becoming. So if you want to do, I had a fairly involved animation, it's over 3,000 frames. I just want to render out, instead of doing a wireframe render or a play blast, which is what typically you would do and sending it to the client. You know what, I'm just going to do a sort of a grayscale, basic material render, throw it on the render farm at Rebus and see how long it takes. It costs $3. I mean, it was, it took 20 minutes, and it was more like $7 or something. But that's how, and it took about as long as it would take to do a play blast in the Viewport. So cloud rendering is super accessible now. And I should do a Pixel Fondue tutorial on that. And you just launch it right from inside Modo. You just hit it. By the way, it also supports V-Ray. So you can launch a V-Ray renderer from Modo on the cloud at Rebus Render Farm today, right now, and it works great.
Yeah, I've used it. It's good.
Yeah, you've used it, Andy. So do you see that? Do some of the corporate clients that you work with, do they use cloud rendering services, or do they invest in the hardware themselves?
It kind of varies. I think it depends where they're at and who's in charge. I think if the artists are in charge, they usually use the render farms.
Right. Right.
If management like to buy the servers, but it varies.
Yep. So just let me reiterate: Radeon Pro Render GPU rendering being developed in Modo right now. It's open source, so there's some collaboration perhaps with some of the Maxon teams and something like that. Going to be maybe seeing first light in maybe 6 or 8 weeks. Shane, sounds like maybe get a download for the subscribers and people on maintenance.
It doesn't seem like it's that close, but yeah, November is going to be here before we know it. Our first milestone for that is mid-November right now. So, but again, it has to be ready before we're going to put it out there. We want to make sure, you know, what we showed at SIGGRAPH couldn't even save an image. It was a very basic implementation of the plugin. So we have to get quite a bit more working before we're going to put it out there.
But it's using standard Modo materials, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it uses pretty much, I mean, outside the procedurals, it'll use any of the materials, any of the lights, the cameras, environments. You can have HDRI lighting. There's even material lights and things like that we're working. So the only interactive component of it that we had working at SIGGRAPH was the camera interactivity. So we got to work on connecting light and, you know, interactions, material interaction, and all that stuff needs to get working, and then to be able to save an image as well.
And like you said, the work done on Radeon Pro Render is going to help any sort of plugin renderer in Modo.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's on the surface it looks like it's going slow, because there's really a lot of re-architecting, you know, really the whole preview interface, and even how our own preview render connects to Modo is getting reworked as part of this. So there's benefits to this work all around, not to just the 80, you know, Radeon Pro renderer, but to all the different renderers that plug into Modo.
Sounds good. So we are approaching an hour here. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Modo Indie. Lots of people have been asking about that and asking me in particular to bring this up during the live stream today. So any nuggets of information you can give to people hopeful for an updated Modo Indie, looking to get into Modo Indie? Shane, you want to talk to that, or Derek?
You want me to go, Shane?
Yeah, I'll let Derek take the ball on that one.
So, I mean, yeah, I'll let Shane get some more details. I will simply say that we're 100% committed to the idea of it, right? I think it drives more people to the product. It gives people into the product at a different price point, in a different way, to the point of kind of talking earlier about how to learn the product. You know, there's a 30-day trial. Indie is a great way to learn the product without making the same financial commitment that you're making on a perpetual license or a year. So we definitely want to do it. I'd say the complicated parts are, obviously, we have our own subscription licensing now in Modo. So bringing Modo Indie into the product, into our way of doing things, means that, you know, now, for example, Ed can communicate with indie people through Slack instead of having to go through the Steam forum, right? It allows us to have an upgrade path. It allows us to do things like whitelisting, you know, plugins, allowing you to have things like, you know, like potentially like a mop boolean, something like that, and have plugins. The problem with it is that, you know, it's currently on a platform. It needs to ultimately move to another platform. And there's a bunch of complicated things in making that move happen.
You mean it's currently on Steam and needs to move? Is that what you're saying? Needs to move off?
Correct. And so there's a question of, well, what happens? You know, we obviously we really love like the people, you know, jumped on board on Steam. We want them to kind of come with it, and we need to do it in a way that makes those people feel like they're being kind of rewarded for coming along and not sort of, you know, being left out to dry. And so, yeah, I'm not trying to be sort of hand wavy about it. It's just I don't want to make promises that we have to turn around and change later, because it's not all sort of in our hands, so to speak. Yeah. So, you know, I will simply say that, you know, given that we're now on subscription and it's gone very well in terms of driving, you know, one of the biggest, you know, issues people had with Modo was the entry point. So subs has really allowed people to kind of come into Modo at a lower entry point. I know there was some consternation when we did it originally, but actually the feedback we've gotten from people is really, really positive. I think Indie is sort of the next step on that. And so, yeah, I know people want specifics. When are you going to update it? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? I wish I could give specifics. I can't today, but hopefully in the next, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, we will have a plan that kind of really explains not just one update, but what the whole plan is going forward.
So it sounds like, yeah, Modo Indie is an important part of you know, the Foundry's 3D ecosystem, and they're looking to get it out there. Sounds like subscription's gone pretty well once the initial kinks were you know, worked out, which were expected, I think. It sounds like, yeah, no?
Yeah, I would say there were two bits. There was a technical bits of, you know, getting it to work, and you know, having people, you know, having issues with people, you know, maybe signing up for the wrong thing or not really having it work the way it was supposed to. And so I think there was probably, a month-long period where we're kind of working the technical parts. And then obviously, as you well know, there was the marketing aspects of it, of explaining the message and getting it out there. And that was hard. I mean, I think it's a difficult thing. I think, there's a lot of industry issues, industry baggage, if you will, around subscription that we had to tackle. But I think, I think we've shown people that we're doing this for the right reasons. Our goal is to get more people into Modo, get those people, through the trial, through subscription, make it easier to come into Modo, have people like Ed out there to, help with the training. So I think we've shown that we're kind of, walking the walk to a certain extent here, and really trying to listen to the customers, listen to the community, and do the things that we've been asked to do.
Yeah, I think if you're happy with the program and the price you're paying for it, and you feel the company's on your side, has a vested interest in its users succeeding, then subscription is not an issue. You don't hear people walking around like, Creative Cloud is killing me. Like, I can't stand this. I mean, it's like you get Photoshop for $15 a month or something. I mean, nobody's complaining about that, it all works. And so, yeah, once the nuts and bolts of the technical aspects are resolved, and it sounds like maybe they are, then, subscription could be running smoothly. So it sounds like Modo Indie would be a subscription service. You want to move it off of Steam. I see some comments over here from the live stream. Some people like, thank goodness it's coming off of Steam. So it sounds like that's maybe a good move. And potentially whitelisting some plugins. So one of the things you see a lot with a lot of the indie programs, are like even like over on Maya's side, they don't allow scripting or Python or some things like that, which is understandable. It's a lower priced entry level application. It's not something you want a client to replace their entire pipeline with. Obviously, there has to be benefits to the company as well as the consumer, but potentially whitelisting plugins would maybe allow some products from the community like Mott Booleans or maybe the Max HD rigging kit or something like that to show up in the indie product. And one of the things we've seen, really in the last year is a revitalization of the Modo community in terms of a lot of kits coming out and assets, a lot of them revolving around modeling, materials, a ton of like kit bash types. So in fact, I think probably like a third of the stuff on the Pixel Fondue shop are kit bash assets. And so you're looking at a new way of, not necessarily a new way of modeling, but perhaps like the technology and the features and the workflow and the availability of all these models has all come together. And so kit bashing is just a really quick way of banging out concepts. And so in terms of bringing assets into Modo, I'm just going to segue to one more thing here. Bringing assets into Modo from kits or online resources, are you doing anything that would make that in Modo that would maybe make that a little bit easier, more streamlined workflow for bringing in some of these without having to jump around to 50 different sites and download it on zip and move it to directories? Is there some easier way of doing this? Is that something we can talk about?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit more forward coming into the what we'll be talking about here in a couple months. But community is king to us in a lot of different ways. That's why we're bringing Andy onto the team, Ed onto the team, and as we're doing a lot to rebuild just a lot of different community aspects within the product itself. So we are working on better features within the product to showcase those different kits and those different things directly within the product. We're looking to revitalize the complete asset share site that used to be a really key value add inside of the Modo community that today, many Modo users don't even know exists. It's been kind of taken down since the new website. It's still kind of there, but not really there. But we're really looking to revitalize all of that and make it directly accessible within the product, which I think is really key, because we want to create a friendly ecosystem where many more Williams of the world can go out there and create these kits and these types of procedural assemblies and things like that and share them. That's what that system was built for. And we have to create kind of the back end framework for people to showcase that and to share it with others in a more easier way, and in a way that allows them to make money on it too. And that's important to us. We don't want to close that down so that you only share things that we sell. That's not something that we necessarily hold, to importance to us. We want to make sure that, the whole community as a whole is a viable marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You want the community to have a vested interest in the success of the program. People releasing asset kit, packs. You don't have to be a programmer, right? Well, like I said, over a third, maybe up to a half of the stuff on the
William would probably tell you he's not a programmer.
Not a programmer, yeah. He just does a little bit of scripting, but like I said, a lot of the stuff is just model parts, materials, things like that. And Adam O'Hearn, who did a lot of kits and plugins for Modo, he'd always say his assets sold the best. And he would get the most sort of interest in those. So anything to, Modo Indie, I think would be an integral part of that. Anything to attach more users, more active people onto the community and give them an opportunity to make a little bit of money or get their stuff out there, make a name for themselves, I think is great. I'm trying to think if we have anything else to go for. Anything else, Derek or Shane, you want to say? Andy, Ed?
I'll just say that we're going to come back in about a month, I think, and walk through, go through 11.2 in a little more detail. And so, yeah, I mean, I think our goal was kind of as we kind of move forward on this, is do these for each release and come with the release, and then kind of in between releases, have one where you kind of have it more open-ended kind of questions about, the company, community, where we're going. And so, yeah, thanks for having us. Definitely, it's great.
Yeah, Andy, anything?
Yes. Well, it's interesting what you're saying about model bashing, because I've got some ideas about that.
That's good to hear.
For the future. But maybe we should talk offline.
Oh, I've got some ideas. We can talk offline.
Good. My door is always open.
We got a couple other questions kind of popping up here. So people are asking, like maybe a live link to ZBrush or a live link to even Keyshot, which is interesting, even though there's lots of rendering options within Modo. Keyshot's pervasive. You could bring, sometimes people like to work in Modo as a platform for scene setup rather than Keyshot if you're bringing in product families of CAD files, things like that. But it sounds like the technology that you have is sort of a general data sharing technology that happens to work with Unreal Engine right now, but of course expanded to whatever.
Right. It's a generalized network protocol, kind of client server connection, and we do intend to open that up and expand on it, but we got to basically get the APIs kind of locked down and finalized and working through particular workflows before we start opening up that more and more. I definitely see us expanding more with internal products to the Foundry, and we're going to continue to look at external products. ZBrush is a great contender for that. Who knows, maybe even a Maya bridge as well. There's lots of possibilities where we could take that tech.
Substance Painter, maybe?
That would be a great one too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would love to see that. Substance Painter, Substance Designer is outside of Modo, is the second most requested set of tutorials training that we get over Pixel Fondue. More substance. We'll get some stuff from Wes put up there. And it gets a ton of views. So there's a lot of people who use Modo who also use Substance, and there's probably a lot of people who use Substance who would benefit from using Modo, who maybe use something like Maya right now. That being said, if you use Substance and you want to make some tutorials for Pixel Fondue, contact me and we'll get you up there. I think that's about it. We recently set out a newsletter at Pixel Fondue, so sign up for that if you haven't. Like Shane said, we're going to get them back here in about a month, right? So is it full month or is it less than a month at this point? I think we delayed a week, so.
Yeah, I think we're looking mid-October or so. We'll connect back up and do another one of these.
Mid-October, 11.2 release. And then Ed, you can find Ed online and chat. I suggest you get on the Modo Slack channel, as your sort of second conduit. Yeah,
the official Foundry Modo Slack channel for sure. And you don't just have to be on the trial. Pop by the Getting Started section on the Foundry forums. If you have any questions or if you feel like just seeing what trialists are working on, stop by there for sure.
Give me the 3-step process if I don't know what Slack is. Like, how do I get on that?
Wow. Okay. I guess go to slack.com, type in Foundry Modo in the Slack search box, and then type in your email and sign up. And you should get an email. That's 4.
It's all right.
It's a 4-step process.
But go to the website, go to Slack, and type in
Foundry Modo.
Foundry, not Foundry.modo, just Foundry Modo.
Good question. Let me just check. Let me check on that.
Yeah, I don't even.
It might actually be foundry-modo.slack.com.
How about this? We can give Greg a direct link. That's an invite exclusive link that users watching this can click on when he posts it to YouTube.
Give me the link. We'll put it there. We'll put it on Pixel Fondue. We'll tweet it out. We're on Facebook now too.
And it is part of the newsletter that went out as well.
Oh yeah, the newsletter. That's right. You put it on there. Yeah. Right. By the way, the Wolverine, the favorite member of the Weasel family, our latest survey for Moto users, outvoted the otters. Although if you added up all the otters, the giant river otter, the regular river otter, and the sea otter, otters would win. But their votes were split, so the Wolverine took it. You don't know what I'm talking about, sign up for the newsletter.
I have otters in my backyard. That's why I went with otters. So.
You have otters in your backyard in Florida. I guess so.
Oh, yeah.
All right. All right. Hurricane Ed, new nickname. Hurricane Ed at Slack.com. All right. Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks, Foundry, Derek, Shane, Andy, and it's probably late over there, Ed, down in Florida. And let's start downloading stuff from the Foundry website. Let's get some people on Modo VR. Let's start talking to Ed. We'll start sending some ideas Andy's way and get the ball rolling. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you in 1 month. Sounds good.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. We are out.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.